the 11th verse. We're going to talk to you what God's given us on today. Amen. I thank God for being back in Wisconsin. Amen. Back in the land of the living too. Amen. Amen. I thank God to be in the land of the living. It could be that you wouldn't be here. Amen. It could have been that God took you, amen, took you home. And see, you got to know the wisdom that God blesses you to have. I want to talk about, amen, the leaven of the Pharisees. Amen. We're going to talk about the leaven of the Pharisees. We're going to talk about yeast today. Amen. The leaven of the Pharisees. I think it's vital, it's important that we learn. Amen. This thing was in my spirit. I couldn't shake it. I was like, my God, Lord, you are dealing with me a little bit with this. The leaven of the Pharisees. I'm going to touch on it a little bit. Let's go to the book of St. Mark, the 8th chapter, and we're going to go around the 11th verse, and we're going to share with you what God's put in our spirit, what God's put in us a little bit. We're going to try to explain as much as we can. I'm beginning reading from St. Mark, the 8th chapter, 11th verse, and I'm reading from my NLT, and it says, when the Pharisees heard that Jesus had arrived, they came and started to argue with him, testing him. They demanded that he show them a miracle sign from heaven to prove his authority. When he heard this, he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, why do these people keep demanding a miracle sign? I tell you the truth, I will not give this generation any such sign. Notice he said this generation. So he got back into the boat and left them and went across to the other side of the lake. But the disciples had forgotten to bring food. This is where we go. I want to deal with his disciples here. They had only one loaf of bread with them in the boat. One loaf. And that's why I started to name it One Loaf. But I said they won't get it. That's too deep for them. So let me tell them what I'm talking about, the leaven. Because y'all wouldn't have got it. If I would have said what I wrote and I just crossed it, I said they can't get that deep. I say one loaf, they'd be like, what the heck you talking about, a loaf of bread? So I made it where you can understand it. But those that can go deep, you'll get the revelation. One loaf. It's deep. You got to think about this. One loaf. Look at your neighbor and say, one loaf is all it takes. Oh, help me, Lord. Watch this. He said, now watch out. He says here in the 14th, but the disciples had forgotten to bring food. They had one loaf of bread with them in the boat. As they were crossing the lake, Jesus warned them. He warned them. Somebody say one loaf. Watch out. Beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and of Herod. He warned them. He knew that all they had was one loaf. So he's talking to them. There's a reason why I'm saying one loaf. We'll get to that at the end. At the end. Some of y'all may already got it, but most of you won't get it until I get to the end of the lesson. You should see their faces. They're like, anyway. Like, okay, I just won't get it then. Okay. We ain't got to get like that, saints. Amen. Amen. Just follow along. Follow along. Amen. And so he says, watch out. Beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and of Herod. At this they begin to argue with each other because they hadn't brought any bread. Jesus knew what they were saying. So he said, why are you arguing about having no bread? Don't you know or understand even yet? Are your hearts too hard to take it in? Have you eyes? Can't you see? You have ears and you can't hear. Don't you remember anything at all? When I fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves of bread? And how many baskets left over did you pick up afterwards? 12, they said. And when I fed the 4,000 with 7 loaves, how many large baskets leftovers did they pick up? 7, they said. Don't you understand yet? He asked. I want to talk about the leaven of the Pharisees. Now watch this. Yeast or leaven is a component spice that changes, watch this, the fiber of the dough and of the making of the bread, and causes the bread to rise out of its normal shape and form, and makes it much lighter and changes even the texture of the dough. That's what leaven does. Most of you, all the bread that you buy, matter of fact, if you're not Jewish, the only bread that you buy is leaven, unless you're buying some crackers.
Wow. Amen.
And depends on what kind of crackers you buy. Because some crackers have a little leaven in them. And so there are crackers. Some of you, and you say, well, when you take communion, that's unleavened. Those little tabs are unleavened. But all the bread that you eat has a rise to them, and the texture of the bread has been changed. All it takes is a very small, seemingly insignificant amount of leaven or yeast, and it causes change. It doesn't take a whole lot to bring a significant change. Matter of fact, an insignificant amount will bring significant change. This is how powerful yeast is in the bread. You would be surprised a small granule that they put in a loaf of bread. If you could look at it and you did it yourself, you would be very shocked. The very insignificant amount of leaven that goes into a whole loaf and causes the whole texture of it and causes the whole form of it to change. The attributes. It causes it to rise. Bread or flour, when it's mixed and made into a paste, into a dough paste, naturally does not rise. It is the leaven that's put in it that causes it to rise. Watch this. Out of its natural form. It causes bread to rise out of its natural form. So when you buy your little loaf at the store, that ain't how it looks.
No, that's right. No.
That's not how it looks. It is the yeast that have caused it to rise out of its natural form. It renders the bread to look more than what it really is. This is why most of you that will study nutrition or get involved in nutrition, they always tell you that you're not to eat a whole lot of bread, or a whole lot of bread is not significant in your digestive system to help you, to nurture you, because what's in it does not help you much. And so they say you don't need a lot of bread in your diet.
That's right.
I was raised to eat bread. I hate to say it, I was raised. Matter of fact, where I came up, they made us eat bread. Why they put that bread on your plate? Eat that bread with that chicken. You don't eat that chicken without bread. And it so affected me that I have a hard time now eating any meat without bread. It's like the meat is not right and does not taste right unless I got bread, because when I was coming up we were made, and the reason why, I'm going to tell you, they did it because bread actually is more of a filler than a nutrient. Oh, help us here. Come on, give God some praise. You better catch this revelation, because I'm actually giving you revelation. It's more of a filler than nutritious. And so your mom and dad figured out, those of us lived back in the day, they figured that out and said, I can't afford to buy, he gonna eat 7 pieces of chicken. He gonna eat half a loaf and eat 3 pieces. That's what he gonna do. So mom and dad got smart and said, we're going to put bread with it, because if we put bread with it, we know that it's a filler, but we cannot afford to give you the real meat. So bread became a substitute. It became a substitute, and it became something that was used to fill in, but never was nutritious if you ate too much of it. It causes the very fiber and the texture of the bread to change. It changes the entire texture of it when you put it in there and you put it in the oven and you bake it. It changes the whole texture of it. It affects it to the place that it doesn't even look like its original form. Once yeast is applied and once heat is applied, the original form that it came in is totally opposite of what it's supposed to look like. It also causes the bread, when it is baked, to mold faster.
Yes, sir. You're right.
Unleavened bread will last you 5, 6, 7 times as long as something that has yeast in it. Anything that has yeast in it will mold quick. After a week or 2 weeks, you'll begin to see green mold on it, and that mold is from the yeast, because the yeast begins to turn. Oh, y'all don't hear me.
Oh, that's good.
Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, that yeast begins to turn. Now watch this. It begins to turn, and watch this, and attack the very fiber of the bread that it changed.
That's good. That's good.
Oh, y'all not getting this thing. See, y'all can't get it tonight. It begins to turn. At first, it seems good. At first, it seems great. Because it changed the fiber and it blew it up and made it soft and made it tasty, made it look good. But after a week or two, come on, say, once the yeast is set in, it begins to turn and it begins to attack the very fiber that it changed.
Wow.
Believe it or not, I'm almost half done. It causes the bread, when it bakes, to make mold quicker, faster. It changes the process and it kills the longevity of the dough. Imagine that. The longevity. It destroys the longevity. It starts out as something good. That's why if you ever looked at the bread, you had it on top of the fridge or in the cabinet, and you come out and you get ready to pull it out, and all of a sudden, the reason why people put their bread in the refrigerator to freeze the yeast.
All right.
Oh, y'all ain't getting this thing. To freeze it and to slow down the process
You're right about it.
of changing it. So as long as the yeast has free course,
Preach, Apostle. Good. Come on.
it will destroy it.
Yes, sir.
It will tear it up. It will cause it to mold. Now, mold is what you call a fungus.
Yes.
The yeast causes and turns the bread